Welcome back. This is Kate Hannon, the Director of Integrated Wellbeing at Skyterra Wellness. I'm glad you're listening today because this is our last episode of the Webisode series where we are diving into the power of self-compassion. We've been talking a lot about self-compassion, defining it, and discussing how pertinent it is to practice mindfulness to bring awareness and attention to those moments in your life where you may be exceptionally hard on yourself, and then finding ways to bring comfort. Rather than beating yourself up and feeling shameful or guilty, like most of us do, we learn to begin practicing acceptance, kindness, maybe even forgiveness, learning those tools to help us better respond to our lives with peace and ease. And so we all want to feel this way. But why is it I've heard from so many folks that self-compassion feels confusing, or it's for wusses, or it's weird, or sort of scary, some general feeling of resistance to it? So let's talk about that today. In part 3, we will get into what happens when you start practicing self-compassion and how you come to realize that in order to truly live this way, you learn to value your health and happiness. So this is our third step to cultivating self-compassion, is prioritizing your value of health and happiness. And I know if you're listening to this right now that you already do value that, or you wouldn't be here. Know that when we change our lives and how we relate to ourselves, our beliefs get challenged. An example of how this shows up is when people say things like, well, if I stop being hard on myself, then I'll probably gain 50 pounds, because if I really let myself have what I want in that moment of suffering, I'll live on ice cream. Or what about feeling sorry for my struggles sounds so victim-y. Like, oh, poor me. Why would I feel that way when people in the world have real problems? Mine aren't so bad. So let's get this straight. Self-compassion is not to be confused with self-pity. Kristin Neff, a psychologist and author who researches and collects data on self-compassion, is a pioneer in this field. In her studies, she learned that most people tend to withdraw and isolate when in pain. This is quite common. We all do this. We start to believe that we're separate and different, or this condition I have, or because I don't have kids, I'm not married, maybe I'm too fat. Ultimately, I am different. I am not a part of the whole. This sense of not belonging or feeling separate only exacerbates the pain, and that is not self-compassion. It is not feeling sorry for yourself to the degree where the world has done me wrong, because that kind of thinking can get a person carried away. It gets really hard to step back from your pain to create that pause. So you're not becoming your beliefs, like, poor me, everything always goes wrong. Instead, witnessing, I'm having feelings of failure today, and I'm feeling really unlovable right now. And then self-compassion comes in. This is one of those hard days. It will pass. May I be kind to myself. May I be happy. So self-compassion is not self-pity. It's also not self-indulgence. Self-compassion also means that you want to be healthy and happy. It's really believing that you deserve it. So wanting to be healthy and happy may mean to some degree that there's unpleasantness, that will happen for you. We have been confused because we've been taught to believe it's through extra hard work and criticism, lots of willpower, tons of discipline that creates true change. And yes, those values create success and can be very motivating, yet also lead to burnout and feelings of depletion, especially if you're a caretaker or live a very stressful life with a hard job. When you live your life under the rule and thumb of your inner judge, you may feel like you're controlling every aspect of life, but what happens when something out of control happens? Does it all turn to chaos for you? Do you retaliate? Do you engage in behaviors that harm yourself? You can't value happiness and at the same time live with this controlling part of you running the show all the time. So when we truly understand that self-compassion is not self-indulgence and that what we're really practicing is empathy, we are able to create true, sustainable change. When you create action in your life out of empathy, you follow what makes you feel good. So getting up in that cold morning isn't really fun, you get that, but you connect with the part of yourself that wants to feel good, that honors happiness and health. You're motivated to feel good and fundamentally understand that life isn't all about feeling good in every moment. There are moments of suffering. There's a universal understanding of that. Kristin Neff also realized a phenomenon that happened when people began practicing self-compassion. She calls it backdraft. a firefighting term that describes what happens when a door in a burning house is opened. Oxygen goes in and flames rush out. A similar process can occur when we open the doors of our hearts. Love goes in and old pain comes out. There is a saying that describes this process well. When we give ourselves unconditional love, we discover the conditions under which we were unloved. I love that. Neff says, too, we can meet old pain with the resources of mindfulness and self-compassion, and the heart will naturally begin to heal. Still, it means we have to allow ourselves to be slow learners when it comes to practicing this. And if you ever feel overwhelmed by difficult emotions, the most self-compassionate response in that moment may be to pull back temporarily, focus on your breath, or the sensation of the soles of your feet on the ground, engaging in ordinary behavioral acts of self-care, such as having a cup of tea or petting your pet. By doing so, we reinforce the habit of self-compassion, giving ourselves what we need in the moment, planting seeds that will eventually blossom and grow. This is how we shift the world through love. By practicing it with ourselves, then we start practicing it with others. Somebody out there right now is probably going through the same feeling you are. You are not in this alone. It's important to remember that. For the majority of time humans have lived on this earth, we've lived in community with other people. We are really wired to be social. So I invite you to even get outside your comfort zone. Get to know people. Really listen to their stories with an open heart, and share yours as well. It's not about having pity for yourself, but recognizing and admitting to yourself and others when you're having a difficult time. Yeah, so you might feel like you're failing at life. Well, you might be surprised that taking that moment and being vulnerable, that person understands that feels that way too. It's about really believing too that you deserve health and happiness, and you learn to find ways to take care of yourself. Because you deserve it. Why? There is no reason. It's because you're alive. You're here. This is the power of self-compassion. With this in mind, take this moment now to bow to your own heart. You can say to yourself, may I be happy and free from suffering. May you be happy and free from suffering. May we all be happy and free from suffering. Loving yourself is healing the world. Thank you for listening to our Webisode series on the power of self-compassion. If you're interested in learning more or want information about our life-changing program, please visit skyterrawellness.com.